welcome to the Knife Freak Show. My name's Jonathan Mcnees. I've got my co-host, Mr. Chase Boatright, with me today.
Here I am, rock you like a hurricane.
It probably feels a little bit like we've been getting rocked by a hurricane with Blade Show 2 weeks out, but I guess less than 2 weeks now, technically. Right?
14 days away as of the day of recording, but yeah. So
that's the day of the show, though, right? Not.
Yeah.
That's we'll both leave and get there and set up on Thursday, so.
Yeah, so that's just what, like, they have a countdown on their website, so that's just where I pull it from every time.
Right.
So
that's right. For us, drop dead day is basically like Tuesday. Wednesday will be packing and getting everything loaded up and all that stuff. So as far as work getting done on stuff for the show, that a week from this coming Tuesday is kind of drop dead day. So speaking of that, how's your progress going?
Good. All but one knife is finished. All the for the folders, at least. I got 7 done completely. They're actually just over here to my left, packaged up and stuff.
Awesome.
Had to start on a new blade for the last one yesterday, so I'm hoping it will still make it. But yeah, it wasn't wanting to center for me, and I tried a bunch of different things and got to the point where I think I just ruined the blade and had to call it. And yeah, it was real lovely. Like, I was, pretty close to finishing that one. So yeah, it not the funnest thing, but yeah, sometimes you just got to call it and move on.
Yep, that always sucks, but you end up better off in the long run. You'd probably end up wasting more time, probably end up having to scrap it anyway, or not being completely happy with it. So
yeah, and I was to that point where I had spent basically like a whole day just screwing with it, and I was just like, you know what? No, I'm done.
Yeah.
So.
Yep, it happens. Part of it, unfortunately. So, but that's good to hear, though, that you're making good progress. It shouldn't be. Maybe this final stretch won't be too stressful for you then.
Yeah, definitely. After I get a couple in the coffers, as it were, the stress level starts to go down where I'm not going to just show up with an empty table. Like, I have a number in my head, but if I want to hit that number, and theoretically I want to go beyond that number, but we'll see.
Yeah, but you're right. Having at least been able to say, okay, we've got some stuff for the table, even if it's not everything I wanted, but I still always put tons of. My problem was, like, it didn't matter how good, like, no matter how, I could set a number and be like, okay, I won't get this number, but then if I hit that number early, like you said, then I'm like, oh, I bet I can do 5 more. Let me see if I can get. That'd be awesome if I could take that, 5 more instead of just that, and then the exact same pressure all over again, even though they're basically like bonus. But then I just, put that pressure on myself to get just that little bit more done. And then usually end up getting there and being like, man, I brought too much stuff.
Yeah. And I kind of sort of am doing that. Like, while I was working on that other blade, I went ahead and had another blade that was cut out that I went ahead and threw in with it and started working on it. Like, while I was drilling holes and surface grinding, I was like, well, I'll go ahead and throw this blade in there too. And, while I'm heat treating, I might as well. Instead of just heat treating one blade, I hardly ever do that unless it's one of these situations where I'm just trying to, fix something. But I was like, basically emergency heat treat. But yeah, how's y'all's blade show stockpile coming?
It's going good. Before I move on to that, though, I want to tell a quick story on what I just mentioned. This might be for any of the other makers and stuff out there, especially guys that are maybe, not too far into it. Maybe this will help you. So it was probably like maybe my second blade show. It might have even been my first, but I don't think so. I think it was second, maybe third blade show that I exhibited at. I did exactly what I said. I went crazy. And this was all fixed blades at the time. It was, I just, I kept making and kept making. I set like a ridiculous number I wanted in the first place, and then I just kept making knives. And now, granted, some of these knives at the time I was making, like my devil's toothpick, stuff like that, which those of you that aren't familiar is basically like a cross between like a Kiradashi and a scalpel almost. And some fairly simple stuff like that. But I think I ended up with like 50 knives, which for, a handmade guy making fixed blades by himself is quite a few knives.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, you go to put that on a table, like, and then I would make the mistake because that time, I might have some that were a couple that had the same handle color or whatever, but most of them were different and unique. They might be the same model with different handle color, different stuff.
Yeah, but if they had the same handle color, I'm betting they had different liners because you're like me, and got to
More
make
than
it a little
likely.
different. But yeah,
Right.
so
That, and a
you
lot of, most of it probably, or at least a lot of it probably had Hamones on there. And of course that makes them all
yeah,
individual too. And so I wanted to put them all on the table. So the table was super crowded, which was a mistake. And then also, um, this is my main point. Perception is a lot, guys. Like what
yes,
people see. So, like I remember we had sold. I think we were down to. I sold about half of them. I think, which like again for a young guy, couple of shows into it or whatever, you know, table full of fixed blades. You're a new guy. Like selling 25 knives is freaking phenomenal. Like
yeah,
that's a lot of knives to sell for. It was at that time. That was again. I mean, a lot of them were small. Pretty simple stuff, but still and my prices were certainly very low. But but I remember some guys came by the table. My wife actually overheard them as they came by the table. One of them kind of nudged the other one. This was on probably the third day. It might have been late the second day or third day.
yeah,
And they walked by, and one of them kind of elbowed the other one, and the other one was like, "He ain't sold her anything." And I didn't hear him. I mean, she relayed this to me after the fact, and I was like, well, crap, I've sold, probably more knives than half the freaking fixed blade makers in here selling, 25 knives. And
yeah,
they're walking by thinking I haven't sold anything. So, like, from that point on, I still have a problem with putting out too much stuff, but that always stuck with me that, you don't want to go to the point where people think because like it or not, people gravitate toward things typically that I'd say probably the majority of people gravitate towards things that are popular. Like that's
yeah,
just it's just human nature. You have a few outliers that gravitate that are going to do the exact opposite. They're repelled by anything that's popular. That's why Magna Cut gets popular, and then Magna Cut. I want anything but Magna Cut. Whatever
yeah,
specific knife brand or model gets popular, it's like they're repelled by the hype. And I think those are probably the same kind of people that always like to be the one of the first ones to get in on something, but then by the time they're the early what's called an early adopter. So
yeah.
by the time it gets popular, so excuse me, by the time it gets popular and a bunch of people are wanting it or have it, then they're ready to move on to the next thing, and be the early adopter on something else. But anyway,
Yeah, I mean, it's just like in anything else. I mean, like, there were
wow,
people who were fans of Nirvana or, Metallica back in their, early days. And then once they blew up, they're like, they went, corporate and,
oh,
they sold
they
out or
sold
whatever.
out. No, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. If it goes too
So,
mainstream, then those hardcore people don't like it anymore. It's that's just human nature. You can find that
yeah.
across every genre of anything that we do that we that's subjective that we like or don't like. Art in any form, anything like that. So same thing with cars. A lot of people don't want. Some people are just totally just fine having the car that everybody else has got, and they know that it's they've heard from all those people. They know they've gotten back the feedback and know that it's great or whatever. And then other people would die to drive something that you see 20 of on the road every time you leave the house.
Yeah.
They'd rather drive a beater than to drive a nice car that everybody else has got. So it's just different personalities. But I think the majority of people are drawn to what is popular to other people. So if you're back to the point, if you're making it look, even though my stuff had sold really well, if you're making it look like it's not selling for probably the majority of people, that's a negative right off the bat for them. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean that they're not going to check your stuff out and buy it, but it definitely is kind of putting a roadblock there. You're immediately giving the impression that your stuff is not selling good and not popular. It's the same reason that like it kind of bothers me a little bit, the whole like announcing like that we sold out and stuff like that, because I've never, at least I don't know, you maybe not could tell it now, but I typically have never been like a real braggadocious kind of person. Like I don't really like to like I feel bad to announce that hey, we had a big win or we did this or whatever. Like you know
Yeah.
I do it more now because I know I need to, because of the very reason that we're talking about. and I guess I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because I'm kind of actually getting into the topic that one of our main
A
topics
little
of the
bit,
show.
but I
Yeah,
think you do it more in a way of saying thank you to the
that's
supporters more so than
exactly
a
what I try to do. Yeah, and give
yeah
credit
feather
to
in
our
the cap
team
sort of situation.
and the people that are supporting us. Yeah,
Yeah,
but there is something to be said. There's a reason, guys, that when makers are because you guys pay attention to it. And it's the same thing with stuff selling out like on our site or whether it's at shows or whatever. Like because I can't tell you how many times I've seen you guys know that some of you I'm sure do it yourselves. I'm not saying it's wrong, but like a maker drops something that's some popular drop, and you go look, and then it's like, oh man, I can't believe there's still some of those on the side. I can't believe that you're impressed if they sell out quick. You're unimpressed if they don't. And then it puts like a negative connotation to it if it doesn't sell out quick. It's like, oh well, they weren't popular enough to sell out quick, and so and that affects people's decision making when they buy. So
yeah,
it's a fine line to try to have enough volume and please everybody and get stuff out there, but you can actually cross the line to where you shoot yourself in the foot, and then you know people are less interested because they think that less people are interested. So
yeah.
it's
And I've had similar issues. I never quite brought 50. I haven't quite got your levels of ridiculous yet, but that first blade show I brought 38.
yeah,
And I wanted to put them all out on the table because they were all slightly different. And I'm like, well, what if the
yeah,
guy that likes blue walks by and just sees
right,
the green one,
yeah,
and or something like that? And so you want to put everything out there, but it's hard to do that both spatially and just because the perception of it looks weird. So
right. Plus, you got to think. I mean, that the guy that would like the blue one may walk by your table, but there's also a fair chance with that many knives on the table that their eyes are just going to kind of glaze over, and
that
they're
too,
not going
yeah,
to pick out the individual. Like the more choices you have to offer, the harder it can be for people to narrow down and actually even like you walk up. And I do the same thing. I walk by a
yeah,
booth or a table or something. It's just overwhelming amount of stuff on there. It's like your eyes just kind of glaze over, and it's like that. It's really you know nothing really pops and catches your eye because it's just so much. You can't see the forest for the trees. You know what I mean? Like it's just
yeah. Like
so.
I feel bad for some of the suppliers at the shows and stuff because it's hard to, they have so much variety to put out there, but like
Yep.
you know, it's so hard to display all that in a clean, concise sort of manner where you can like walk by and see it.
Right. That's right.
But
It's you gotta kind of be looking for it and dig a little deeper sometimes to
yeah,
see
I
it.
mean, I've
But
I've definitely dug through boxes looking for a certain color of micarta or carbon fiber or whatever. But yeah, it's
yeah,
one of those things.
right. But we'll circle back around in a second to finish answering your question. Yes, our Blade Show prep is going really good. And by the
Good.
time this airs, uh, I will probably already have announced this. So if not, then surprise, you guys get to know first. But if things go according to plan, I'll have already announced this. The team has done so well that we are going to have enough Dixons done that we're planning on doing another uh, decent sized Dixon drop this coming, well, what will be this week when this is dropped.
Sweet.
Yeah. So like they really they've really kicked it into high gear. We got some blades rolling and got the blade grinding, not perfected by a long shot, but going well enough that we can kind of get in a rhythm and get things going. So yeah, once we did that, things really took off. All the prep work that we had done on getting handles ready, going ahead and putting hardware in them, all that kind of stuff, and now you know they were kind of sitting on go. So as soon as we started feeding them blades, they've been able to really knock it out of the park. So I'm
Nice.
I'm super pumped about that. Not only to have plenty of supply to take to Blaze Show, and that still leaves us. Don't worry, guys that are going to Blaze Show. That still leaves us a number I'm very comfortable with of taking to the show as far as being able to meet demand pretty well. So do make sure if you come to the show, you come by and see us. We will for sure have Dixons, and we're going to have basically a variety of. We're not doing any milling patterns yet, but we are doing our different anodized colors and stuff. So um, we'll have we'll have a pretty good variety. And again, go at wherever I haven't nailed down the details yet of the drop, but wherever at this point. I've probably already announced it. Just go check it out and see if you're not going to Blade Show. They're doing that kind of specifically. The intention is to do it for people that are not going to Blade Show.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll probably have a few that are just, in a hurry to grab one, and they'll go ahead and grab it. But the intent is that it's a drop for the people that are not going to Blade Show. We don't really have a way to, it's going to kind of just be it's not technically going to be, against the rules to get one if you're going to Blade Show. But I would prefer if, the majority of people that get one in this drop would be the people that aren't going to Blade Show. So,
yeah. But
I would
can't
much rather
police the internet.
people that are coming to Blade Show come by the booth and get one so that I can actually see your reaction to it, get to talk to you about it, watch you pick it out in person, shake your hand when you buy it. Like I want as many people as possible to do that. I want to, not only for your sake, but because then, we'll probably have multiple, of the same variation. If one feels slightly different than the other one, you can see which one you like. But from a selfish standpoint, I want to get to see the look on your face and get the feedback and be able to shake your hand and thank you for supporting us and stuff in person. So yeah, if you got in mind to get one, and you're coming to Blade, then I would highly recommend just coming to the booth and getting one rather than trying to get aggravated with this drop. So anyway. So
cool. I'm glad it's going that well. Man, I know you've been, you were worried at one point about, being able to get enough. So I'm glad it's kind of flipped on its head a little bit.
Yeah, we did. And I will give a little shout out to Peter's Heat Treat. So one of the big things that was, because we went from having like none ready to having a great amount ready, in a fairly short amount of time. And it was because we were waiting on blades to get back from Heat Treat. And we actually had two separate batches, smaller batches that we had sent out, a few days apart. And they did a really nice quick turnaround for me and got them back to us. Actually got both batches back at the same time. So then, like I said, once we had blades to work with, we were kind of off and running. So that worrying about the lead time and stuff on the Heat Treat was a big variable there for a little bit. And I was pretty concerned, but they hooked us up, did a great job, and we're ready to go now. So,
sweet.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that I'd kind of gotten ahead of myself on the topic, but we had talked about maybe touching on some marketing type stuff. Just kind of what we do, our thoughts on it, some of the specific challenges to marketing knives in particular, and that kind of stuff. So, again, I didn't really do it on purpose, but that kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. But
that was partially why I wanted to talk about it, because I know you can just kind of, you've got lots of knowledge in that area, so you just kind of think that way.
I don't know about knowledge.
Yeah, sure.
Lots of thoughts for sure. So before I start rambling again, then do you have any thoughts up front that you wanted to hit on, or kind of points to narrow down my rambling?
I don't know. That's kind of hard to, bull rope your rambling, but no, I mean, I just kind of wanted to, kind of, I guess both of us kind of ping our thoughts off of each other on like different aspects of marketing. Like, we were discussing before we, kicked off on air, like the whole aspect of Blade Show itself, the paying for the table, the being there, the talking to people is a form of marketing. It's not necessarily a billboard. It's not an Instagram ad, but it is marketing. And, it's not just, swag and stickers and, and social media and stuff. It's, there's a whole lot that goes into how you put forth your brand out there and how you want your brand to be perceived. And I think that's the hardest part for me is like, I want my brand to be a certain way, but it's sort of vicariously undefined in a lot of ways. Like I know what I want, but it's like a case by case basis. I can't necessarily put forth a grand plan, and explain every single thing I want in like a I guess snapshot sort of way.
Yeah.
But
well, I think that you're right. You're never going to. I mean, it's kind of always like, and it's always like steering a ship. You're always making like anybody that's ever driven a boat or anything like that. Like it's for driving a car for that matter. Like it's always a series of small adjustments
Hmm.
hopefully you can keep them small. If things are going good, then you're making small adjustments. If you're about to crash, sometimes you got to make a big adjustment.
Yeah, you never want to have to rip the e-brake and
That's right. You
do
want
something
just
crazy. But
small, gentle adjustments. Just keep things flowing smooth, ideally. Unless there's times when there could be something to be said for shaking things up and intentionally making a hard right or left turn. But but yeah. So yes, you're 100% right. But just going to Blade Show in person, period, is marketing. I mean, you got to think marketing's been around for forever. It used to not be uncommon for local businesses and stuff to go and do door knocking campaigns in neighborhoods and stuff like that. That's in person marketing. I mean, it's the
yeah,
same. You know, it's it's still the same thing. It's just in a trade show environment, and trade shows have been a huge thing for forever. So yeah, it's definitely marketing, and then there's all the then you've got all the little tactics of what you're going to do with your marketing, from, uh, you know, whether you're, how you set up your table and or booth, which one you're going to get to in the first place, which
yeah,
sometimes is just a matter of what you can afford, which that's a good note right up front. A lot of marketing, sometimes it's just people don't put thought into it, but it's also a lot of times what you can afford to do.
yeah.
There's limitations, there's financial limitations and stuff too, because, I do all kinds of stuff if I could afford to do it, But
Y- And it's also, I think the whole reason this got me, I got thinking on this track is I drove past a billboard in my small town the other day, and it's like, rent me billboard, like it's brand
yeah,
new, nothing's been put up on it yet. And I
right.
had the thought for a second, I was like, I can get a billboard. And then I was like,
Yep.
I can't keep up with, the current orders I have. I don't make knives fast enough in my current capacity, to, keep up with that in my current,
Right.
demand, I guess,
Right.
is,
So,
far higher than the supply, which is a good
right,
thing.
right.
But
Yep.
like, something like that would be an unreasonable thing for me to do.
Yes and no. Um, Considering what it would probably cost to do the billboard, yeah, it would probably not be, the juice probably wouldn't be worth the squeeze right now for you to do that.
Yeah.
I do think though, and this all depends on where you're trying to go with your business too.
Hmm.
If you're, trying to grow kind of, without a ceiling or whatever, you're just trying to grow as much as you can, then yeah, you're right. You can only take on just so much work. However, I think you can very easily fall into a trap. And I think you always need to kind of market a little bit ahead of where you're actually at. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So I feel like you need to already be aiming at that next level with your marketing versus like, well, I've already got all, because yeah, that's true, but that can also change really quickly.
Yeah.
Because I've been in this long enough to see customers that were like super customers, like, buying up everything I could not tell you how many different people I've had that have been like just rabid super fans for a certain period of time, sometimes for years. And then for whatever reason, either they just they get tired of the hobby and get out of it altogether, or they just
Yeah.
get enough of your stuff and they move on somewhere else or whatever. Like, people that you would think, oh, this guy's going to be buying stuff from me for forever, and they don't. I mean, people, it's
Yeah.
it's a cycle. There's constant turnover and stuff. So with that in mind, even if you're not necessarily thinking about growing, you've got to keep yourself in front of people so that as that turnover is happening, that you're not just losing people, you're actually gaining people, hopefully at a higher rate than you're losing people, because again, it's just, and it's not that those people that leave necessarily like don't like the brand anymore, whatever. They just, I mean, it's,
Yeah.
for the most
Sometimes people
part,
just get burnt
they,
out. They,
yeah,
lose interest, whatever.
I mean, they've bought like every model you've got, and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, and then they may come back and later when you come out with something new and, start back up or whatever, but it's not, it's not really a negative thing or like any kind of a, insult that they're moving on. It's just the nature of the beast, and so
Yeah.
it's
I just think the billboard in my particular analogy
yeah,
would have been like 2 or 3 steps ahead of where I'm at right now, not necessarily like the next step.
right, right,
I do
yeah,
want to keep, growing the customer base and the, clientele,
what
as it were. But
right. What I would do, and so in that situation, because I've had some of the same thoughts. That number one, I don't think a billboard in my local area, or even
yeah,
maybe up there and maybe in Birmingham, where if we've got we do have a one dealer up there in Birmingham, Marks Outdoors, um that carries some of our stuff. So maybe somewhere like that where it's like, and then put on there, like available at Mark's Outdoors or whatever, that
yeah,
so that people, it's not just some random. I mean, yes, people might just go look you up on the internet and find you. So I could be wrong. I've never done a billboard, so it might produce better results than I think. For us where we live, number one, there's not any freaking billboards because we're out in the middle of
yeah.
nowhere. But even if we did billboards the closest place, I don't think the return on investment would be that great on it, for something like
That
that.
that was also the other aspect of mine. Like, it's
Right,
not off the side of the interstate; it's like on the highway,
right,
towards the interstate, but not it's not that much through traffic, and
yeah,
I don't think the juice would be worth the squeeze if
yeah.
in that
It
scenario.
just all depends on the price of the billboard too. I
Yeah,
mean, and
yeah, that too.
if it's because typically the higher traffic locations they're going to be more expensive and stuff.
Yeah,
So it might be worth it. We've got some. I don't know if I'm quite ready to say what it is, but we've got some plans to potentially look into something that along that lines in not too distant future. So I can kind of let you know it's not definitely not like a billboard in our hometown kind of thing, but I do have some plans for something along that line. So I'll let you know how that goes.
okay.
If and when it happens. Well, I'm not going to say that when it happens because I've already kind of made my mind up that I want to do it. So it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. So, but yes. So on that thought, taking from that part of the conversation, like I said, I think you need to kind of, if you're growth minded and you're wanting to continue to grow your brand, grow your business, I think that you need to kind of always be like looking ahead and kind of not in a fake way, but kind of like building yourself up as far as from a marketing standpoint and a optics standpoint to be maybe a little bigger than you actually are.
Yeah,
Um, we've always done that. I feel like I kind of know we are because we get uh, we get people I can tell that think we're a lot bigger operation than we are. You know what I mean? They're like,
yes,
it's so it's
and that's sort of what you want, but it's also can be like you're like,
yeah,
dude, we got like 10 people here,
yeah, right. It's like
So,
we're not building as many knives as you think we are, and we're
yeah,
not we're not nearly we don't have a people be like, hey, is this Jonathan I'm talking to on Instagram? And I'm like, yeah, I don't have a social media. I don't have somebody hired to do social media yet.
yeah,
Yet.
yeah.
That's actually, I'm hopefully is going to be one of the things in the not too distant future that we're going to be to the point that we can. But yeah, it's like I said, people, I think in large part just because of and like I said, I don't put out just bullshit. You know what I mean? Like I don't try to say, like, I mean, everybody's seen the entire inside of our shop. Like they've seen all of our employees. Like I'm not hiding anything or whatever. It's just that I try to really stay kind of front and center in front of people's eyeballs. You know what I mean? And like,
Yeah,
and not be afraid to throw our hat in the ring with the big boys and stuff. Like, I mean, I feel like at this point that we're being mentioned with, some of the guys that are what I consider the titans of our kind of category in the industry, that our name gets mentioned with them on a regular basis. And I'm like, yeah, you know, there may be like a 40-man operation or 60-man operation, and we're not even, we're like a third of that, or
yeah.
less. So,
They have
um,
more CNC machines than you have employees plus CNC machines. Yeah.
hmm so I feel like that we're doing a decent job of putting our name out there and doing that. And it's just, and one of the biggest things to remember, I think, with the marketing and stuff in general is, and even though I know this, I'm also guilty of not doing a good job of it sometimes, but you have to get stuff in front of people over and over and over. You have to stay visible. You cannot assume that because you made a post showing your newest, doohickey that I can't see you on the video. So guys, I think we mentioned this last week, but the way we're having to record, we can't see each other. But I got a
Yeah.
feeling Chase just smiled when I said doohickey. So just
A little bit.
so anyway, you got,
Well, last time we had this discussion, you said you showed the world your thing. So,
yeah. I'm not showing the world now, but I am, we're talking about it. So
yeah.
I guess that's close enough. But yes, when you feel like, okay, I made a post, I've told people about whatever, I've told people about our new model. Well, then it's really, really easy to think that, okay, the world knows about it now, and you're just going to sit back and wait for everybody to go crazy over it. Well, like, even if you have a decent number of followers, like you may have, 30, 40,000 followers, and then you look at that post and it may have been seen by, like, if you're lucky, a couple of thousand people. Like, not everybody is seeing it like you think they are, for one thing.
No.
And even if they did, and even if they liked it, like, did they really look at it, or did they see your name and know? Because I'm guilty of this all the time. Like, I have, most of the people that I actually follow, like, if I come across their, as I'm doom strolling through my feed, when I see their post, I've been guilty of it a bunch of times. Like, I won't even actually stop and look that close to the post. I just double tap it and like it and move on. I'm like trying to support them, but I'm not really actually looking. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so, I've done that a bunch of times. Amy will be like, "Did you see so and so, whatever, said this or posted this?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't see that." He's like, "Well, you liked their picture." I was like, "Well, yeah, but that don't mean I saw it." So
yeah.
I've got to assume that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I think, we've had this conversation both ways where, like, hey, did you see so-and-so? And then one shows it to the other and they're like, oh yeah, I did see that. I forgot about that. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
It's just because it's out there and people may have seen it. It's not necessarily front of mind and,
it doesn't
as
mean
memorable as you may think.
That's right. It doesn't mean they absorbed it. So
yeah.
We live, I think everybody pretty much knows now that the main currency in our current society is attention. And so it also is, everybody has, for the most part, really short attention spans, because we're bombarded with so much information at our fingertips constantly. Like, again, you can look at something, and then, that you see in the beginning of your feed as you're scrolling down through there, and say, oh, I see Mcnees has got this new model, or new, they're doing this in a new color or whatever. And you scroll down, and then you see something else that's like, whatever that you like, or that pisses you off, or that whatever. And then by the time you get done with your phone and set it down, you've already completely forgotten about the new thing that Mcnees has got, that, because you're thinking about, what so-and-so said down here, that, about something political or about whatever that's got you pissed off. Like, you know what I mean? Like, our attention spans are really short these days. And we have to keep that in mind when we're trying to market and put our stuff out there, which means you have to be redundant. You have to put your stuff out there again and again and again, to the point that you feel like you're probably annoying people, and then do it a little bit more. And
that's definitely an area.
Yep.
Like, that's an area I definitely need to improve on.
Yep. Me too. And even though I know that, I'm sitting here and telling that like I'm, know what I'm talking about. But in practice, it's harder to do. It's really easy to feel like, man, I don't want to show this same knife over again or whatever. I don't want to, I feel like people are probably going to get tired of seeing it or whatever. But again, out of all the people that follow you, how many people actually saw it? And out of the people that saw it, how many of them actually paid that much attention to it to really see it? It's just, same thing with announcing drops, or doing, whatever, talking about where you're going to be at Blade Show, like, or that you're going to be, we've been talking about Blade Show for forever, and with us doing the podcast and in between podcasts and Instagram and Facebook and all that, I'm like, of course everybody knows we're going to be at Blade Show, not to mention the fact that we've been at it for every year for, I don't know how long we've been doing Blade Show now, probably 16 years, something like that. But then I still get people, you going to be at Blade Show? And I'm like, well, yeah, yeah, I'm going to be at Blade Show. Like, of course I am. But people still ask. So it's, you really almost cannot reinforce stuff enough, whatever that is, whatever information you're wanting to get out to people, you almost cannot reinforce it enough. So
yeah. Another thing I wanted to kind of mention in this topic was probably not what you're thinking I'm about to say, because I'm going to throw you a curveball. But like, you just came out with the second of your tattoo series boxes.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
I know, like, I was there during the whole first iteration of planning and all that, so I kind of know what went into that. But like, I know the theme you were going for and sort of like the, I don't know, ethos, I
mm-hmm.
guess. So like, what sort of inspirations like that do you try to bring into your brand? Like, what sort of outward projection, I guess, do you
Yeah,
want? Not necessarily terms of like, business, particularly side of marketing, like just, but like sort of the, I guess, more intellectual, the feeling you want that
right.
for people to have.
Got you. So like when people see, for instance, the artwork on a box or whatever,
Yeah.
what message are you trying to convey with that? And that's that's actually really good that you're even thinking along that lines, because I think a lot of people don't. You know what I mean? Like they just think, oh, that looks cool or whatever, and so they
I get bogged down more in that part of it than the actual side you've been talking about. And
yeah,
I get stuck. That's my first gear, and I hardly ever get out of it because I can hardly ever make up my mind. And,
yeah. Well, I also
but
think that, like, I mean, yes, you want to put thought into it, but I don't necessarily think that it's something that you've got to put, just drive yourself crazy about. I don't
yeah,
think as probably as deeply about it as you think that I do. It's just I so like for one, so just like when we did the original boxes, and they are different. I think at least at the time. I've seen some other people now that have some pretty cool artwork and stuff on their boxes, but. And I may be wrong. There may be somebody else that already had something kind of similar, but I don't remember seeing anybody else with boxes with like tattoo style artwork or like illustration kind of stuff really on the boxes before we did it. But again,
yeah.
there may be somebody that's been doing it for decades. I don't know, but yeah, I really
I mean, there
like
probably are in other industries. Like, I think I've seen
yeah,
shoe boxes and stuff that have like, more radical art designs like that and stuff
okay,
more in that realm,
right,
but not necessarily
in our
in the
industry,
knife world per se.
yeah, yeah. So one of my main thoughts was just very practical. Was that I wanted something to have a box that when we sent stuff to brick and mortar uh, locations, our dealers that have brick and mortar, I wanted something that was going to stand out in the case. When people are like we were talking about a while ago, people not noticing stuff because there's just too much stuff to see. I wanted something
Yeah.
that was going to jump out and catch people's attention and be different. So
Yeah. I mean,
that
there's a
was
bunch of white boxes with stickers or black boxes with
right.
stickers on
That's
them,
right.
or just, sort of basic branding, and
The name
not throwing
printed on
shade
them.
at that. That's where my interests lie more so in branding, is more simple.
Yep.
But
Right. And there's nothing wrong with simple either, but you can still try to find a way to kind of make it stand out or whatever. So yeah,
yeah, and I don't want that. Yeah, that, I think doing it your way is probably, like, it's supposed to be eye catching. It's not supposed to be minimalist and simple. You can do that with the design of the knife,
right.
and
Yep.
but the outside packaging should probably be more eye catching.
Yeah. And honestly, like I think this is probably the best right way to do it. So when you're talking about like trying to figure out kind of what image you want to put out there or whatever, I feel like that pretty much everything that we put out image wise, like down to the artwork on the boxes to the whatever, they're really all just kind of like representative of like me and my personality,
Yeah,
in some respect or the other. You know what I mean? Um, like I like tattoos. I like ink. I don't have a ton, but I do have some, and I got the first one drawn up by an actual tattoo artist, and and then ended up we got it drawn for the box, but I kind of already had it in my head that I might want to do it someday or whatever. So I got it put on my arm, and then um when we went on to do the other graphics, and I'm a big like we got several we don't I wouldn't call them logo. I guess you could call them logos. Like the Be Nice one, that's on the original boxes. That's it's kind of a logo, but it's really just more like a graphic. It's not like
yeah,
our signature, like my little skeleton Sam is technically like our logo, whatever. But but I like different. I like art for one thing. I mean, I really like artwork. I like illustration, and especially that kind of that style of artwork. So I just wanted to incorporate that into it, and some basically just dude, almost everything I do could be summed up and just saying I'm trying to do something that's going to look cool. Like I see these guys out there. I think I've mentioned it before. Like there's some of these people out there that's like everything they do is just oozes cool. Like I mean,
Yeah.
like everything about them, like every product they put out, you just know if they put it out, it's going to be cool. Like the guys from Starling Gear, like dude, Rick couldn't do something not cool if he tried.
Yeah.
It's
Like we were
there's
talking about
one
last time, Bastion. I mean,
with Bastion from Bastionelli, yeah,
yeah,
same
like
deal.
his
Like everything he
logos,
does is
his
cool.
branding,
Yep. Right.
his
It's just
shirts, like everything,
right.
top to bottom, seems to
Yep.
represent him in maybe a
Yeah.
conflated sense or an inflated, version of himself. But
Right.
that's what you got to do to kind of project it out there.
Right. Yeah. It may be a little bigger than actual. You know what I mean? But it's yeah. I mean, it so like with our new graphics, it was I just kind of wanted to stick with something along that same kind of theme as far as similar type artwork. And the eagle one that we're doing is we did it but originally basically for t-shirts stuff. I honestly didn't necessarily plan that to be the next to change the boxes up. That was kind of Amy's deal. She was like, we need to do some different boxes. We need to change them up or whatever. And so I think she
Yeah, I was sort
actually
of
stayed
surprised
with
to
me
see that.
to do the eagle one or whatever. And so I was like, yeah, it probably is time to change it up. And then I was like, that'd be cool. We start doing them like a whole series. It's like, then maybe people will want to actually, it be kind of become a thing where people want all the different boxes or whatever. So like,
Yeah,
I always like that kind of stuff. So it's like, a variety of stuff, but limited. So it, kind of makes it more collectible and that kind of stuff. So anyway, yeah, I got that drawn up to do on shirts and stuff, and then she decided we need to do it on the boxes. So I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. And by that time, I'd already gotten it inked on my arm as well. And so she was like, that was her idea. She was like, this is going to be the tattoo line because like so far both the logos you've already got on your body. So I was like, well, that'll work. So I guess I need to be figuring out what the next one is going to be because
yeah, got to get more tattoos.
ready to get more ink. So she gave me an excuse to get more ink. So I don't know.
Yeah,
We
well,
did the eagle and the raging ape graphic at the same time. I had both those drawn up at the same time, and I don't know hadn't decided for sure if it's going to kind of make it onto there. So I would say so. The eagle one, as far as though like besides the the tattoo portion of it or whatever, kind of representing my personality and my personal preferences. It also is kind of an Americana. You know what I mean? The
yeah.
eagle. Obviously it's got
The,
the nod to America, Americana stuff. To our "Made in the USA" mantra. So that was
yeah, it
kind of
definitely looks like a old school sailor tattoo or marine tattoo, that you'd see
yep,
on an old guy, but
right.
not saying you're old, but
Well, it is what it is. but
you know
we
what I'm saying.
yeah, and we threw the some red and blue in there with it to
Yeah.
make it even more along that line. So it's most of the shirts we just do single color, where you don't really see the color. But for the box, yeah, we spiced it up with some color, and yeah, I'm really happy with how that came out. So yeah, and then like I said, I don't know for sure if we'll put the Raging Ape on a box or not, but that's again that's kind of just a little too often. I'm probably a little bit more like the raging ape than I should be. So raging about something. So probably more like a raging monkey than a gorilla, but that's fine. Gorilla looks more cool. So
Yeah. All right.
yeah, we'll see what happens next with it. But yeah, just and so to bring it back to kind of the marketing stuff,
Yep.
I feel like that it kind of depends. Like not everybody wants to build their brand around their persona, which there's a lot to be said for not doing that in a lot of
Yeah.
cases. I feel like you want to at least build it around uh, your principles, your ideals and stuff, but not necessarily around themselves. And that's totally fine if you don't. I feel like in what we do, it's kind of hard to not do
Yeah.
that. I mean, it's
especially
hard
with
to
your
do.
name being on the side of it. Like it's,
Yeah, and even if we had picked that's what I'm saying. Even from the beginning, if you didn't want to be like, I'm not going to make this about my name, about me. There's tons of companies out there that are, not the
like Spartan Blades,
yeah,
but
right.
they kind of already have a built-in marketing plan and, sort of names
And
along with
they're
that. Like,
yeah, and it all
but
ties into the owners, the founders of the
yes,
company, because they're very military. They're retired military special forces guys. So like
it's
everything,
an extension, but yeah,
exactly. Ernest Emerson, same deal. I mean, his knives are known for all the tactical stuff. He's always been the martial arts tactical guy and stuff. So like, it's just you know, I'm sure there are some companies out there that it doesn't necessarily, you know, they're not as owner slash founder uh, centric, but
yeah,
I think in our industry and what we do, it's way more normal than not for it to be, some software company or something, whatever. You're not necessarily going to have it built around the personality of the founder. You know what I mean? But like with what
yeah,
we do, because it usually starts as kind of a one person, artist craftsman kind of person building something up. It's just, I think it's way more common. So, but
yep,
just yeah, I think you just try to basically make the company an extension of your values and to whatever extent you want to your personality. Like if you're somebody that is, not super serious and you like to joke a lot or whatever, kind of the comedian type, the class clown type, well then you may end up with a knife that looks like a hot dog or something. I don't actually know the full story behind that, but just for example, you see what I'm saying? Like your
yeah,
company might do more fun, whimsical type stuff or whatever.
yeah,
You see most of the guys that come from military backgrounds and stuff, their companies are a little more like based around hardcore, tactical stuff or whatever. Like it's just most of the time it's an extension of the personality of the people behind it, and
yeah,
so
for sure.
I I think it's probably wise to do a little bit of a self audit and make sure that you're actually putting out, pieces of your personality that are the good pieces. and and if you have pieces that you wouldn't want the public to see, then maybe that's a good sign that you need to change some stuff about yourself and not encourage those pieces. So
Yeah,
you can kind of use it as a little bit of a self audit too. Like, hey, if I wouldn't want the world knowing thinking this about my company. Well, then maybe that's not how I need to. Maybe that doesn't need to be part of my personality.
yeah, and
So
yeah, that is also another hard thing about it though, is kind of doing that like introspective look and being like, okay, what are the good parts of my personality? At least that's a difficult part for me, where it's like, it's hard for me to kind of put myself out in the world like that. I guess I was never one that I didn't have social media until I happened to meet a knife maker on a plane, and he wanted to
right,
send me some books and told me to send him a message on Facebook. That was when I created Facebook, but
yeah,
um, created my
you're
Facebook.
kind of
And
an anomaly for people
yeah,
your age. And,
yeah,
and
I
you're,
am. But I mean, that's one of the things that makes it, I guess, difficult for me, like to kind of, you know, I guess put myself out there a little bit,
right,
because I was never one to be like, hey, look at me, look what I'm doing. So,
yeah, yeah,
but it is a necessity for the business. So it's like, I
yep.
don't know.
It's just one of those things you kind of gotta. And I mean, you can still do it in your own way, but you still kind of
Yeah.
have to a little bit. I feel like you kind of have to just swallow that and and do it. You know what I mean? Like it's just a certain amount of it. You're only going to attract so much attention being kind of the wallflower over here. I mean, even if you're putting out a great product, again, the whole idea now is to get people's attention on it. If you're
Yeah.
not getting people's attention on it, then you're only going to go just so far.
Yeah.
So
No,
but there's
I
also
definitely know. I just, sorry.
yeah,
What?
I know, but I totally get that it's hard because, like I said, I've never been quite as stay in the shadows kind of type as you, but like I have not always been who I am now either.
Yeah.
I used to be way, I was a guy that probably would not fire up a conversation. I probably wouldn't be the one starting the conversation. I'd just be kind of hanging back. I'm not, whatever. But I've kind of I've worked on that. Even when we started going to blade shows and stuff, like I was so uncomfortable
Yeah.
Not so much talking to people at the table, but like in the pit and stuff like that. Wouldn't really be comfortable with just walking up to people and starting a conversation or whatever.
Yes.
Just it's just
I definitely had to swallow some stuff and, kind of figure it out for that because I'm like, I went to Blade Show for basically 2 years and hardly ever, basically didn't talk to anybody past a cursory conversation about the knife at the table.
right.
Like I didn't walk up to a maker if I saw him in the pit or anything like that. I was just kind of too shy, I guess. And so,
Yeah. And
but
then you'd leave every show regretting it and wishing you had talked to those people because it's people you'd really like to meet and talk to. Yeah, I've been
yeah,
there. Still do
yeah,
it some, but I've gotten way better about it. Like
yeah. There's sometimes I'm still like, okay, I probably shouldn't go bother them. They're, eating or they're,
yeah. Now
over there
there's
being talked to
tact.
by 30 people.
Yeah. There's definitely tact because I definitely don't want to be the guy that they're standing there having a conversation, with a bunch of other people, and then I'd walk up and like, hey, I just wanted to introduce myself, whatever. Like, dude, like, waste your turn. Like, don't try to come in and interject yourself into the conversation and become the center of attention. Like that's definitely carrying it too far to me. But
Yeah. Did I ever tell you what I did to kind of break myself of that habit?
I don't think so.
But did I not tell you about my maker T-shirt?
Maybe, but you did. I probably forgot. So
Okay, well, I'll share with you guys. In first year I went was 2017. Then I went in 2018, and like I said, I had hardly talked to anybody that I really wanted to kind of talk to a little bit. And so I had a plan for 2019. I decided to get a shirt made, and for reference, my mom runs a T-shirt store, so she could do this for me, and it wouldn't cost me like a arm and a leg. But she put it like there was probably 30 logos of different companies and different designers, and there was a few podcasters on there like Knife Nuts and Mark the Maker and stuff. And basically the idea was to go around the Blade Show and get signatures from all of these people on that t-shirt. And I got pretty close. I got all but I think 4 signatures for that
cool.
shirt. And I've still got the shirt. It's in this room actually. But
So did you wear the shirt or did you just
no,
carry it?
no, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't wear the
Okay.
shirt.
That's a little less weird. I was going to give you a
Yeah.
little bit of a hard time if you had like dudes signing your chest and stuff. Not that wouldn't be
No,
all right, but like it just I couldn't
it
see
wasn't
you
like
doing
that.
that. Yeah, I couldn't see
No,
you
it was
like do right here, but like go no right above the nipple, like right here.
yeah. No, I figured that would make it a
Uh,
little less weird if I
yeah, and
didn't you wear the
whoever
shirt. So
we would know then that whoever's logo you put down closest to the like bottom of the shirt you really liked if you wanted them
yeah,
to sign by their logo, right?
yeah, for sure. I didn't actually choose the placement, but anyway, yes,
I'm
not the
just
point.
kidding. I'm
So
kidding.
my point being in telling that story is like, you know, it's definitely can be intimidating for those of you like you guys that are coming to the show and stuff to like come up and talk to makers just because I don't know for some reason I'm talking as a fan like we kind of put these people on a pedestal, makers and designers and company owners and stuff, and it can be intimidating to walk up and talk to them. Like I remember walking up to Jesper Voxnays and like hardly being able to speak. I was just fumbling over words left and right while I was trying to talk to him. But he was still very gracious, very nice. He's just a cool dude. And, he signed the shirt and thought it was a fun idea. And, that was pretty much it. But like,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to come up and talk to us, especially, like that's what we're there to do, I guess
Yep.
is sort of my point.
And I don't think there's any like I can't think of anybody that I've seen or even heard of that would be like again, unless you just come up and like are super rude in the way you approach it, and like just totally interrupt the conversation or something, whatever. Like if you're just a normal, have normal etiquette and you come up
Yeah.
and talk to somebody or whatever, like I can't think of anybody that I've ever even heard of that would like be mean or rude or whatever. It's like you really have nothing to be scared of. And you got to think, I mean,
No.
most of these guys, myself included, like it's a huge compliment to me if somebody comes up and they just wanted to introduce themselves or they just wanted to meet me or they just wanted whatever. Like, I mean, we all have, whether we try to keep it in check or not, we all have a certain amount of ego. And somebody come up and actually wanting to, like, I don't take that lightly. I don't take that for granted. Like, that's a
Yeah.
big deal to me. It's not. I don't let make me think that I'm something I'm not, but I definitely don't take it for granted. It definitely makes me feel good. So, you're kind of doing them a favor too by doing it,
Yeah.
because again, there's very few there that are even gonna, would have any sort of negative reaction or even thought when you come up and talk to them. And they're all, you gotta think, we're all kind of like the main character in our own story. So like, they're more worried about how you coming up to them and recognizing them as making them feel than they are anything about you. That's just
Yeah.
human nature. That's just the way it is. So like, don't be afraid to talk to them, because chances are they're going to actually really appreciate that you did. So
Definitely. So, um, we were going to hit a sort of subtopic after the marketing thing, but I think we've ran a little long on that. Um, you want to hit a question or two before we head out or get out of here, or
yeah, we can. One thing I do want to say real quick. I think this is the subtopic you're talking about, and I'll try to keep it
yeah,
very brief on there. We won't go too deep. But and we just didn't even scratch the surface on marketing here. As I figured, I got to rambling, and like, but there are tons of things about marketing, to include how difficult it is for us in particular in the knife world, because we all know how social media does us and stuff. It's very difficult to run ads and stuff. There's only so many things you can do, and so you got to be a little creative in trying to get your stuff out there and trying to get people to share your stuff and all that. But also the stuff that you can pay for, like Blade Show, for example, um, or the guys that advertise in magazines or whatever. Guys, that stuff's expensive, and it's one of those things that you don't really. Most people probably don't even take into consideration when they're thinking about the cost of the knife that they're buying, is that company, like, there is more to it than just how much the raw materials and whatever, like how much the water jet guy charged me to cut out the blanks, how much the material costs, how much the water jet guy charged me, how much heat treat cost me, and then get into all the nitty gritty that's on our spreadsheet for the company, as far as the payroll, insurance, all that stuff. So on top of all that, then to try to grow your company and do like we've been talking about this whole episode, then you incur marketing costs, and it's all of that stuff factors in. So when you're sitting there thinking, trying to do the math, and you're looking, okay, I think titanium probably costs about this much, and MagnaCut costs about this much, and maybe their hardware costs X amount. Well, I feel like this knife should be $200 less. Well, do you know how much they're spending on marketing and advertising? Like, because I can tell you now, I just told Chase before we went live, for this year's Blade Show, we're spending an amount that years ago, when I was a custom maker and had been a custom maker for several years, we took home this X amount, right? And we made X amount at the show, or we brought in, I won't say made, because that was before we subtracted out the cost of the show and stuff, but we
yeah,
brought in X amount of money, which at the time was like, personal best, like, wow, I can't believe we hit this threshold or whatever. Now we're spending that exact same amount, if not a little more, just to do the show. Like,
yeah,
so, it's, but our knives still, each individual knife still has to stay in a price range, that's reasonable. But all that stuff gets factored in, guys. Like, it's, there's a lot more to it than you realize. And you have to do that stuff. Again, if you want your company to grow and survive, you have to stay relevant. So it's all part of it. So just keep that in mind the next time you're looking at a knife and this goes for every brand out there. Like, everybody has to deal with that. So just make sure that you're thinking about all the factors when you're looking at pricing and judging a company on pricing. That there's a lot that goes into it besides just the cost of the materials and how much you paid the guys to work on it or whatever. So just
yeah.
we may dive deeper into that on another episode, but that's
Yeah, I was thinking we
that's
would kind of get into pricing and all that another
yeah.
time. That way we can kind of really
While our
dig
mind is
into
on
it.
marketing, that's a thought to think about. That's and I'll say this last thing on the marketing. Technically, so like, not everybody, I know everybody has different business models, but a lot of us sell a lot of our stuff through dealers. And guys, what you guys don't understand is that we may have our knife priced at X amount, but like for us, like, at least to this point now, I'm actually probably going to try to change this number a little bit. But to this point now, the vast majority, way over half of our knives get sold through dealers, which means that we're selling those at a pretty fair discount to the dealers. They have to have enough money, enough meat on the bone. We have to sell them the stuff at a price that they can still make a profit on it while still selling it at the retail price. So when you're adding up and thinking that we're, like rolling in all this money, like keep in mind that the majority of the stuff we're selling, we are not making retail price for it, right? We have to leave meat on the bone for the dealers to be able to make some money too. And that essentially is marketing budget. Like that's one of the biggest things that we do for marketing is to use dealers because they can reach audiences that we can't reach. They have a lot of times bigger audiences, bigger websites, all that stuff. So like that is a marketing cost, and it's a cost that we almost anybody that works with dealers, we incur that cost. So it just depends on what percentage you sell to dealers and what percentage you sell direct. Whatever percentage you sell to dealers, you're already losing quite a bit of money off the top of cost of that knife. So you have to keep that in mind too. Like we're not selling every knife we make ourselves at retail price. So we're not actually getting all that money. Like somebody else is getting a pretty fair chunk of that money on a lot of the stuff that we sell. So just bear that in mind as well.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. But we'll circle back to that at some other time and really dig into the whole pricing thing because that's
probably at least a whole episode by itself. So
most likely. I just wrote it down on a sticky note.
Get at least one, maybe two questions if they're not too long.
All right. First one is from Zach Orr, and he says, just got my first Mcnees Mac 2 3.5. Love the knife, but I'm a big fan of Wharncliffe style blades. I saw you have a Tanto, but would you ever consider doing a Wharncliffe Mac 3.5? Mac 2 3.5.
All right. So I love Wharncliffe blades as well, but no, we probably will never see an actual Mac 2 Wharncliffe simply because the handle design doesn't really allow for it. Though if you turned that blade into a Wharncliffe, it would hit the standoffs like it wouldn't even be close. Like the standoffs could not even come close to being where they are. And it really wouldn't, and we talked about in some of the design stuff, how we talked about how picky I am about the close position and stuff. So that blade and handle were designed to work together in the open and closed position correctly. And, doing a tanto on it doesn't really affect that. There's maybe a couple other blade shapes that we could do, but to turn it into a Wharncliffe would completely change the way it works with the handle. And I just we would essentially have to change the handle, which would basically then make it a whole different knife. So I do have plans. We're going to do a Wharncliffe. I've got a couple of different ideas, at least one of which I think a lot of you will be really excited about if it's the route I end up going. So I'll leave that at that. But yeah, I've already, even though we just launched the Dixon, I've already got some ideas brewing around. I'm feeling pretty inspired on the new stuff. So we'll see what happens here in the next few months. But I would love to have a Wharncliffe, and if I could put it in the handle for the Mac 2, I would. The one thing I could say that I might would be able to do, I just don't know that I want to, is Hinder's Wharncliffe on his. He does a great job of using all kinds of different blade shapes and the same handles. But if you'll notice, like on his Wharncliffe, how it's not like it
parallel with the spine.
Yeah. It's not the edge of the blade is not parallel with the spine. It angles up from the sharpening choil up to the tip. It angles up very steeply. So like as you use the
more
knife,
like a Kiradashi.
Yeah. And so it completely changes the angle of like how you use the knife. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It was a brilliant way to make a workaround to be able to use it in the same handle. But I'm a little bit afraid that if I tried to do the same thing, it would just end up kind of being a little too much like what he did. So, I doubt that we'll ever actually do it in a Mac 2 handle, but not because I wouldn't like to. I just don't think I can make it work, at least not without being too close to something that somebody else did. So
I figured that would sort of be your answer because I think we've had this discussion at some point before. But
I've had a lot of people ask about that actually, and I love the thought of it, and I will look at it a little more. But I can just tell you, knowing the mechanics of the knife, that without doing something changing the angle of the edge. Like there's no way to have the edge kind of parallel to the spine and make it work. It won't.
No,
To be
yeah, it'd
honest
be
with you.
sticking out the back, I believe. I mean, if you
Oh
kept
yeah,
the tip, if you
it
kept the
would.
blade length the same as
Right.
the, drop point, it would
Yeah, that'd
definitely
be the
be,
only other thing you could do. Be shorten the blade way down, which would I can't
yeah.
even that you probably won't see me do that.
So,
That would
yeah,
drive me
Zach,
crazy to have
that's,
that much.
you're getting into our designer brains, and that, we have those
Yeah,
certain rules for ourselves that we can't and won't break. And like, it's all got to flow and, be correct in our minds, not correct, just correct in our minds for
yeah,
us to, kind of put it out there. So
yeah, and it's
hope
got to
that,
work
answers the
mechanically. I
question.
mean, it's just
Yeah.
yeah. If it won't
Yeah.
fit in there, it won't fit in there without hitting something. Like honestly,
Yeah.
we cram so much blade in those 3.5s already that it's some of them are pretty close on those standoffs anyway. Much less if you brought that brought that edge on out to a point straight out. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
anyway, so moving on.
All right. Next one is also, well, no, never mind. This is from Tom Cook. He said, "My understanding is that lefties make up 10% of the knife market. Is that the main reason that you and most small batch makers do not show any love to lefties?" And I believe in his email he mentioned mainly for you, but he would like to hear my thoughts as well. So,
Well, you want to start?
yeah, I'll start. For me, the amount of the knife market that is buying custom knives in my price range is already much, much smaller. And to further, I guess, jeopardize that sale, not necessarily jeopardize, but I can't think
Well,
of a better word, but
narrows the
to
market
further,
down. Yeah,
yeah, to
to
further
further
narrow
narrow
the
your
market
buying market down. Yeah,
by, cutting 90% of the already limited custom knife market, that's not a, particularly wise thing for me to do. So, I don't have any, ill will towards lefties. It's not, malicious or
oh no,
anything, but it just
yeah, no,
doesn't
I
make
hate them.
sense for me to.
Yeah, no, they're awful. They're all evil. I'm
I think
kidding.
I
I'm
was
totally
supposed to be a
kidding.
lefty, but
I'm totally kidding, guys.
they kept putting the pen in my right hand. But yeah, anyway,
Forced
um,
you into it.
yeah, so yeah, just I've talked to a few people who want me to make them a lefty version specifically, and I'm considering it, but it's just one of those things that it requires a complete flipping of every process, cutting the lock, cutting the detent, every single, thing needs to be backwards basically. And, it wouldn't be that hard to do in terms of my process, as far as it would just take me remembering, but I just hadn't done it yet. I'm sure I will at some point though.
Yeah. And so for us, starters, no, I was totally kidding. We don't have anything against left-handed people typically.
Sure.
But so it's a numbers game, guys. It's just
Yeah.
like Chase said. Like you're already dealing with a limited number of customers, and then we found the same thing with like doing certain colors and stuff on knives. Like you start doing like bright colors, whatever. Like you'll have a nice little handful of people that really ooh and ah and love them, but when it comes time to actually sell them, all of a sudden like they get hard to sell because it just seems to be a small portion of people that are actually willing to buy, and we found that some with left-handed stuff. So it's a little bit different for us. So when I was a custom maker, I actually did make quite a few left-handed knives. Well, I say quite a few. I did along over the years. I made several.
Yeah, you made, I mean, compared
Not a
to
lot, but yeah,
most custom guys, I would say you made a lot.
yeah. Because like Chase said, it's not that hard. It's really more of a keeping yourself from screwing up kind of thing. You're just laying everything out backwards and remembering to cut everything backwards, and it's really easy to mess up it. So it does slow you down because you've got to take more time, think about it, because if you're trying to go fast, you're going to revert back to doing what you always do and you're going to screw it up. So there's a certain amount of risk there involved of messing something up. There's a certain amount of it's going to take you longer just because it's not what you normally do. But as you get into what we do with small batch stuff, it becomes a whole nother animal because it's
Mm-hmm.
not just a matter of saying, okay, just reverse everything. I mean, it is, but reversing everything means going to Fusion, going to the 3D model, creating new 3D models that where all the features are reversed, taking all the programming and applying it to all the tool paths to those, making sure that everything's right. Potentially, best case scenario for us would be we might be able to use the same pallets and just run show sides on the lock side, what would normally be like reverse show side and lock side things.
Yeah.
I'm thinking off the top of my head would probably work, but potentially making new pallets. Like it's a pretty big undertaking to do it. It's not just a matter of just, oh, we'll just run some lefties today. Like you have to have all that stuff modeled, programmed, and fixtured and ready to go. And again, it goes back to a numbers game. Is the amount of people that are going to buy them going to be worth all of that?
Yeah.
And I'll be totally honest, and it's probably unfair, but I remember I have not made hardly any. I didn't make hardly any, maybe not any lefties after this, and definitely affects my decision making now about making them. One year, as a custom maker, and it was my fault, but I had the guys were just, it felt like everybody was hitting me up wanting a lefty, like, oh, you gonna bring your lefties to the show? You gonna bring your lefties to the show? And so like I think I ended up making like 3 or 4 left-handed folders and brought to the blade show. And as a custom maker, like that was a lot. It was probably a third of my inventory, probably at least a quarter of it of what I brought were lefties. And guess what? All those lefties that were making all that noise before the show, do you think they showed up with their money in hand? Nope. I think maybe one, and that was it. So like it's just kind of
you've got that 10%, and then of that 10%, are they going to like the material? Are they going to like the color combination? Are they going to like the finish? Are they going to like the model itself?
Right.
Yeah.
Because then, and if they don't, then you're stuck with a knife that you're limited to for sure, because you're not going to capture all 10%. And number one, that 10% figure is like people in the country. That doesn't necessarily mean that 10% of knife collectors are left-handed. I mean that. If somebody could do a poll on that, I mean, it might only be 5 or 6%. Who knows? I don't know if there's some, link between the propensity for somebody to be left-handed and be a knife collector. The average inside the knife community could be higher or lower than that 10%, but my guess is it would probably be lower, if anything. So, so you're dealing with at best probably 10% people, and so it's just you got to worry about, is the market actually there? And I've had people say, well, do pre-sales or whatever. I don't do pre-sales, at least to date. We don't. It's just a whole nother can of worms that I don't want to get into, and like stuff like that. So it's just at some point there's a really good chance that we will break down and do it. But I'll be honest with you guys, like, this kind of goes back to what I said way earlier about like seeming like we're a bigger operation than we are and stuff. We have honestly, like, we are just now, and with this new grinding stuff that we're doing, it's still not totally perfected, but like we are just now getting to the point where I feel like we have really got our systems and everything kind of figured out for the most part, and that we've got guys in here, got a good team that's gotten trained and kind of, can do what they need to do without a ton of, like looking over their shoulder constantly or whatever. Like things are starting to run much smoother than they used to, but like, so like, you just can't. I mean, you hadn't even got the system in place. Like we're steadily struggling to. Just the other day we had to revisit something about what we were doing with the detent holes and stuff, and buy a different drill bit because I wasn't happy with what the drill bits that we were using were doing. Like it's constantly something, and like it just feels really scary to take and introduce. Then okay. Well, when those things really aren't going great, just on building the normal right-handed knives that we build, but let's throw some lefties in there too and really shake things up. It's just so it's not so much a matter of just yes, we may be missing out on some sales by doing it, but if slowing down and doing everything we needed to do it caused us to build 5% less knives that week, are those sales going to make that up? You know what I mean? Maybe, maybe not. So there's a lot to balance there. That being said, I would really like to do some small runs of left-handed at some point, but things are going to have to get to running a little more smoothly, a little more consistently with what we're currently doing before I will feel comfortable throwing a monkey wrench into the whole system and reversing everything. So kind of a long answer, but
No, I mean, I think it kind of needs to be elaborated on, because I mean, there are, I do understand the struggle and the plight of the lefty living in a right-handed world, but it is just, it's a numbers game. It's not necessarily, it's not personal or anything. It's just,
right.
We're selling a product, and we want the product to sell. So we're going to try to hit the widest number of people we can. It's just numbers.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that
all right.
but it's it's not necessarily just super easy to just switch
Yeah,
and do it either. So
that too. Yeah, it's not as simple as turning a switch and everything
just
being
tell
hunky
the machine
dory.
to cut everything in reverse. I
Yeah,
wish.
do the left-handed grinds.
That's right.
All right. Well, I think that's enough questions for this week. I didn't think we'd run this long on marketing, but I should have probably known
Probably,
better once I
yeah,
turned it
probably
over to you.
predictable. Get me to rambling about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think
but I
you
think
guys let us know if that was an interesting topic or not. If you'd like to hear more about it, that might be one of those things that's just more interested to us, like
yeah,
makers and owners, whatever, that are that you guys may not be able to care less about it. I don't know, but let us know, because I would love to do at least one, maybe a couple of more episodes where we center on that some more. So, and maybe start to get some feedback from you guys, because I'm always open to new ideas for ways that we can market and get eyes on our stuff. So,
yeah,
and we got some really
for sure.
smart listeners and stuff out there. So,
Yeah, I know I definitely enjoyed it, but yeah, like you said, I'd like to hear what the people think and, go from there. And if you'd like to contact us for any sort of comments, questions, or concerns, hit us at our email. It's knifefreakshow@gmail.com with one S. We'll
or
be
just
back
hop
again
over there
next.
and put
What?
just hop on and put a comment down below as well, especially on YouTube.
Yes.
You guys watching on YouTube, feel free to just comment down below, and that always helps too. Obviously, the more interaction we get, the better. So we appreciate you guys.
Yeah. And our websites are in the description now. I've started putting those down in there, as well as our Blade Show table locations, but I'll go ahead and say it here. I will be at table 15B. Jonathan will be at booth 424. And next week, we'll come to y'all with some sort of more Blade Show centric sort of topics. Hopefully, want to hear you guys' questions about Blade Show. Any sort of, tips or tricks or anything like that you might want to hear from us, or that you can tell us, would be greatly appreciated. So we will see y'all again next week, and let your freak flag fly.